So after 6 months and just over 4,000 miles, I thought I'd better do a little piece on why I'm getting shot of the KTM 1290 Superduke GT.
It's the bare-faced biker.
So to not keep you in suspense, the main reason this bike is going is because of the suspension. But it's not all bad. So before I tell you more about that,
The good bits.
there's no denying it's a stonking motor. And the motor is something that adds that extra level of excitement versus a GS. You really can't deny that. It revs higher, it pulls harder. That said, on roll-ons next to a friend on the motorway, third and fourth gear, next to a new GS 1250, no discernible difference. You really have to put this in a lower gear to really be in the higher rev range to feel where that power carries on and builds. But when you do that, especially if you've got luggage on, you're fighting against the wheelie control because it's just trying to lift the front wheel. So in the real world, any major benefit? Not really, but it feels a bit more exciting. So the riding position is excellent. You've got adjustment here on the bars, 4 different positions that you can stagger the bars, you can tilt them up and down. And after a recent 2,000 mile trip, I had no aches and pains whatsoever. It's slightly canted forward if that's how you want it. It's not as upright as something like a GS, but for me it's nearly the perfect riding position. You're quite high, the seat's quite high, so you've got good visibility ahead in traffic. As I say, quite amazing. They're 2,500 mile, 10-day trip, no aches and pains whatsoever. So big positive, really, big positive. I've got the accessory seat on this, the accessory heated seat, very comfy, no pains or pressure points on the trip, really good.
So also in terms of riding position, you've got adjustment on the foot pegs and on the gear and on the brake pedal, where you've got different positions that you can set it in, so lots of adjustability. The handling, it's a very responsive bike, you know, it turns well with your hips, turns in quite nicely, but the problem is if you press on, it's really the suspension that just lets it down completely. The fuel range is good. I was easily getting 200 miles on a trip, so when you're on a run you get a bit less than that if you're just doing short journeys around town. But fuel tank size, pretty big tank, so quite a bit to fill up. I think it's 23 litres, but very decent for when you're on tour. So haven't got them on at the moment, but the panniers integrate quite nicely with this bike, and they're not that wide, they're within the width of the mirrors, so pretty useful for filtering. The downside obviously being, because they're not that wide, they're not that big. It's got an accessory power socket just up here behind the dash. It's a normal car one, so you can plug in the USB connector that takes a couple of USBs for accessories on the dash here. And also behind the clocks and under the seat, it's got both a switched and an unswitched set of accessory 12 volt cables, so really good for plugging in accessories or wiring things into the bike.
The not so good bits.
So you've got the power, you've got the fun factor in that engine, but the V-twin in combination with this suspension is awful.
The suspension's so easily unsettled. The combination with the V-twin means if you roll off even slightly in a corner, it just gets out of sorts. and it just doesn't hold the road and doesn't follow the bumpiness of the road. For a WP electronic setup, it's really bad. It wallows around corners. If you've got it too soft, it really wallows, and if you put it on rider plus luggage because there's no manual adjustment, it's just rock hard and isn't following the bumps at all. It's just bouncing. It really is something I can't live with, and is the main reason for getting rid of this bike. Now, note the position of the rear cylinder versus the seat. And yes, you do get quite a lot of heat coming off that rear cylinder. It's not noticeable until you get above about 23-25 degrees. But once you're above that, imagine being in hot weather sitting on a heater. That gives you an impression of what this is like.
The cruise control. The cruise control on this model is on the right, which obviously is terrible. It's particularly terrible with the V-twin because if you move your throttle hand even slightly, you've got so much engine braking that you've probably changed 10 miles an hour in half a mil. And so you're faced with an awkward kind of trying to hold this in a position and set the cruise control or reset it. But that's not the only bad thing about the cruise control. The cruise control is very slow to resume a speed that you'd previously set. So if you're on the motorway and you're doing 70, say, and you've knocked the cruise control on or made an effort to put the cruise control on, because it is a bit of an effort, if you overtake something or you get stuck behind something for a bit, switch it off. When you hit the resume button, it takes its own merry time getting you there. And if you're with other riders, particularly on BMWs, their cruise control gets back to the set speed pretty quickly. So with the engine braking on this slowing you down or you speeding up, you find that it's quite awkward to ride in a group and use the cruise. Similarly, if you do an overtake, so if you accelerate and then want to drop down to the original speed, it'll drop below the set speed. So on the Autobahn we were using it quite a bit to slug out miles on a recent trip. So say I'm doing 80 and I overtake something, do 90 for a bit, and then when I drop back down to cruising at 80, sometimes it'll drop down to 70 first and then seems a bit confused for a minute and then picks you back up to 70. It's very odd. And as I say, when you're riding with other riders with like the BMW system for example, they have to keep braking and turning theirs on and off if you're leading or if you're in the middle of a group, and it's all a bit of a faff. So yeah, I'd say the cruise control in this is barely worth having. Useful if you're riding on your own, that's about it. If we talk about vibes on the S1000, oh my lord, the vibes coming through the seat and the pegs on this right now. When the engine gets hot, you get a lot of vibes through the throttle hand, not the clutch hand, strangely enough. But once it's above about 25, you do get a lot of low frequency vibes. I mean, I suppose on the S1000 you get a lot of high frequency vibes, so it depends what bothers you. Each to their own. And at 70, if I put it in 6, look at the mirrors. Left's not too bad, but look at the right one. Yeah.
6th gear. 6th gear, the gear in it for 6th gear is very high. Only really useful and not vibey above about 90 miles an hour. So only really useful when you're abroad on the Autobahn. Anything less than that, you're in a rev range where you just can't see anything out of the mirrors.
The screens and the instruments on the bike are not bad, but another minor annoyance is the menu system. It's not too bad, to be honest, but the big gripe for me is having to scroll through. Did you see how many menus that is from the favourite screen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 presses to get to the heated grips. Okay, it's pretty easy to set them with the set button, then when you get there, but that's quite a lot of my time off the road, and I really just wish it just had a button or something like that.
The rear wheel. Having a single nut may look quite cool, although it's blocked by the big exhaust. But that big rear nut means not many garages surely abroad, if you get a flat, and I have had a flat on this tyre, are going to have the ability to get that rear wheel off. And the high torque value as well that you need to set it up to. So really, when you're on tour, it's necessary to carry the nut with you. And it's quite heavy and quite big, obviously. It's a bike that really does throw mud all over itself. You can see quite a short rear hugger and quite a short front mudguard.
And last but not least, build quality. The two main reasons I'm getting rid of this, to conclude, are the suspension, which is awful, particularly in combination with this engine, and the build quality. To look at the bike as being a couple of years old, it's not too bad. A bit of fur on a few fasteners. I've not ridden it through a heavy winter, but I've had 3 warranty claims on it, bits and pieces, and they did get fixed by the dealer, although it's another trip back to the dealer, which is obviously a pain. And just loads of error codes all the time, and warnings which kind of come and go, intermittent things that then when they get checked on the computer at KTM show nothing, or not something they can put their finger on. And even the guys down there admit that the modern electronics on these bikes are a nightmare. So I've just lost confidence in it, and having lost confidence in the bike itself and the reliability, in combination with the suspension woes and the fact that I'm just haven't gelled with it, for me, that's it. Time to trade in. So I feel qualified to do that after 4,000 miles and 6 months. I've given it a go, but it's going. It's a shame really, because there's a lot to like on the bike, but just those 2 big things that let it down, I really can't be doing with. So before anyone asks what I'm swapping this for, there can be only one answer.